right here in the Chicago River. Anyone who lived nearby dumped their garbage here in the river. Way up ahead of us on the South Branch, there were slaughterhouses. They used every bit of the animals they could. Anything left over, they dumped it in the river. As the river was designed by Mother Nature, it flows right into Lake Michigan. Guess where we get our drinking water? Lake Michigan. Anybody thirsty? Well, we can giggle now, but in the mid-1800s, people were dying just from drinking our water because we were polluting it. It was toxic. So we had a serious problem. We couldn't drink our own drinking water no matter how far out in the lake we put our pipes to get our water. We appointed a commission to solve that problem. We're actually poisoning ourselves with our drinking water, with the river. That commission came up with a bright idea. They said, instead of the river flowing into Lake Michigan, what if the river flowed away from Lake Michigan? Well, that's a great idea, but there's only one problem. There was nowhere for the river to go. To accomplish that, way up ahead of us on the South Branch, we started building a canal. That canal was wider and deeper than the South Branch of our river, so that gravity would pull water in its direction. To give you an idea, that canal was 28 miles long. 40 kilometers in length, 5,000 people worked on the canal at any one time, 7.5 years to build that canal. That canal connected our South Branch of the river up ahead to other water tributaries that flowed into the Mississippi. After 7.5 years, in January of 1900, we crossed our fingers. The last separator between the river and the canal was removed. We held our breath. Would gravity take over? The canal was wider and deeper than the river. Will water follow natural law? And indeed it did. We were excited. Our sewage and our garbage were flowing down the canal away from Lake Michigan, and it was flowing down the canal and down the Mississippi. So we're really happy about that. But guess who wasn't happy? Any city down the Mississippi, because the water flowed down the Mississippi eventually. The city of St. Louis, Missouri specifically was not happy. The state of Missouri filed a lawsuit with the U.S. Supreme Court saying, stop the reversal of the Chicago River. We don't want their sewage flowing by our city. But the Supreme Court ruled in Chicago's favor. Anybody know why? We were just following St. Louis's lead. St. Louis dumped their garbage in the Mississippi. It flowed downstream. The Supreme Court ruled we were just following their lead, and the river remains reversed to this day. So, if you enjoy a St. Louis brewed beer this afternoon or evening, you can thank me and my neighbors for its special taste. Actually, we have much better ways of dealing with our sewage than we did in 1900. No worries. Now, ahead of us, though, we have an illustration of a bridge that is upright. This bridge that's upright is a railroad bridge. 1908, it is upright every day of the year except one. It's no longer in use. It's lowered once a year for inspection purposes. If you look to your right after these river cottages, you can see where the bridge lands, and if it were down, we would not be able to travel beneath it because it's very, very low. No longer in use, still owned by a railroad, lowered once a year just for inspection purposes. Now, I talked about the city of St. Louis, Missouri. Has anyone been to St. Louis and you know what their big landmark is? It's a giant arch. Up ahead on the right, there's an all-glass building. At the base of that building, you can make out the top of an arch. I call this our unofficial apology to St. Louis. The architect would get very angry and scold me immediately. First of all, the building with the arch at the base, that's not an arch. The architect calls that a parabolic curve. It has nothing to do with St. Louis. This is River Point, designed by Picard Chilton, 2017. It's an office building. As we approach the building, though, look beneath the building and you'll see a series of round portholes. And as we get closer, you're going to see fan blades. They're circulating air. That's because River Point here on our right is built above railroad tracks, and those holes with the fans blowing are circulating air to the railroads below. The red piece of art on the right is called Constellation by artist and architect Santiago Calatrava. The building itself on the right is built above railroad tracks on air rights. Ahead on the right, there's another glass building with a very narrow base. It's right after the railroad tracks here, but you can't miss the narrow base. It looks like a martini glass or ballet dancer on point. That's called 150 North Riverside, designed by Getch Partners, 2017. Why the narrow base? There are railroads running in all directions on that site. There's no other place to anchor a skyscraper to. Now here's a photo opportunity. Get your phones and cameras out. As we float by 150 North Riverside on the right after the bridge, look up at the building, the port that sticks out kind of diagonally, and you'll see our entire boat reflected in the building. So you can get a giant selfie of the entire boat as we float by 150 North Riverside here on the right. Where the boat is reflected, those are mechanical floors, and then above that is office space. Keeping in mind, once again, there are railroad tracks running in many different directions on that piece of land. That's why the base is so narrow. That building was designed by Getch Partners. Now look ahead on the left, right after the bridge. We have a building with a lot of corners. They kind of jet out in a series, the glass building right after the bridge. That is also designed by Getch Partners. It's the Bank of America building, 2020. Look at the base of the building and notice how the columns are gathered in groups of 3, tridents. They do that to maximize the views for those offices on those lower floors. As we float by the building, look just above river level and locate the bumpy or serrated stainless steel plates. Those bumpy stainless steel plates came from the Morton Salt building that once stood here. To get permission to tear down Morton Salt, they had to pay tribute to that building. Those are the exterior from the Morton Salt company that once stood here. Now ahead on the left, there's a giant limestone building here on the left. This is the Civic Opera House, 1929, Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. It's home to the Lyric Opera. Today, it's the second largest opera house in the United States. The solid wall is the back of the stage for the Opera House. Office towers are on either side of the theater. Great acoustics inside. Traveling shows, musicals, plays, and the opera perform here. Again, the second largest opera house in the U.S. Opened in 1929. After the bridge on the right, we have a progression of architectural styles. The next 4 buildings on the right were all designed by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, but they tell a story of architectural evolution in its style. The first building on our right after the bridge is called Gateway 1, 1965. Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, modernist style, beauty and simplicity, brown, steel, and glass, very, very popular in the 1960s. Look below it and you can see the railroad tracks. Gateway 1 and the next buildings are built above railroad tracks on air rights. The Amtrak system that services all the U.S. and the Metro system that services our suburbs travel below here. As we continue our journey down the South Branch, on the right, the next building looks like the twin to the first one. It's called CDW Plaza. It came 3 years later in 1968. You can see the Metro train underneath where folks are getting on to go out to the suburbs here in Chicago after work. Again, built on air rights. Now, after so many years of brown steel and glass buildings, people were getting tired of that look. And they were giving an outcry, can you please do something else other than brown steel and glass? So look ahead on the right, this building, the white building, is from 1971 in partial response to public outcry. It's still modernist in style, but it has the white look, white exterior, Little bit different look to the exterior as well. So it's still modernist, but not brown steel and glass. It's called Fifth Third Center, 1971. Keep looking ahead on the right. Part of Fifth Third Center sticks out toward the river. It has giant X bracing on the outside. That X bracing is telling us this is exoskeletal structure on the outside. This portion of the building was built as a trading floor. When you have a trading floor, you don't want interior support columns blocking your view on the trading floor, so it's built an exoskeletal structure to minimize interior support columns. Today, it's home to an athletic club. Then on the right after the bridge, the same architecture firm that designed the last three designed the next building after the bridge, but in a completely different architectural style. The green building on the right after the bridge is called Gateway 4, 1983. Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. But notice the green color, the curve to the building. Look closely at each pane of glass. Each corner is pinched in so the glass bubbles out, giving a rippled reflection of what's across the river from it. So that's in postmodern style. We have color, we have movement with the curve, we've got the pinched glass panes. And again, you can see the Amtrak train that is currently beneath it. It is built on air rights. Ahead on the right, the giant limestone building is an icon in our skyline. This is our old post office. The center portion was 1921, the exterior corners 1934. Graham Anderson, Probst and White were the architects. Look at the massive size of the post office. Because we were home to so many people and many mail order catalog companies, we needed a large post office. So this was built in 1921. The post office moved in 1996. They sold it to an investor who did nothing to it and let water damage much of the interior for many years. Finally, in the last few years, a new group of investors bought it, brought it back to life, spectacular inside. We even offer a tour of the interior because it's so beautiful. And it's an office building today, 98% leased, home to Walgreens, Pepsi, Uber, and other companies. If you're lucky enough to work in that building, you have a lot of amenities. You have an outdoor running track, basketball court, tennis court, green grass, pool tables, ping pong tables, soft drink stations, places to hang out. So you've got a maid working inside that building today. When the post office vacated that building, they needed smaller space. They had computers. Mail order catalog business was falling off. Ahead on the right, through the trees, you can see glimpses of yellow beams. That's the current post office today, where they moved to in 1996. We are traveling south down the south branch of the river. This area of Chicago is known as the South Loop, popular place for people to live and to work. We turn our attention to the left after the bridge, and we see another way of having a river walk. This river walk ahead on the left is on stilts. I mentioned anything newly developed on the river today has to allow for public access or a river walk. Hence, this design was created. This area is called South Bank. The land is being developed by architects, or designed by architects Perkins and Will. When they were digging in this land for the first building here, they ran into something unexpected way too soon. If you live in New York City, you only have to dig 9 or 10 feet deep into the ground to reach bedrock, so about 3 meters. In Chicago, to reach bedrock, you have to dig 10 times deeper into the ground. Well, they ran into stone way too soon as they're digging up dirt here to build these buildings. They discovered that was limestone from a building long since forgotten and long since demolished. Grand Central Railroad Station. To pay tribute to Grand Central Railroad Station that everyone forgot about, they dug up that limestone foundation, cleaned it off, and on your left you see they built an outdoor seating area. That is from the limestone of a building long since demolished and forgotten about, Grand Central Railroad Station. The foundation just a few feet below ground. Ahead on the left, we see a concrete building with the rounded curves. It looks like rounded windows. Those are called eyebrow windows. This is River City, 1986, designed by architect Bertrand Goldberg. Bertrand Goldberg, the architect, observed there aren't a lot of right angles in nature. If there aren't a lot of right angles in nature, why have right angles in my architecture? So I won't. Hence this design. It is a residential building. You can see there's a marina here on our left. If you are fortunate enough to live here and you have a boat in the marina, good news, you never have to take your boat out of the water. Why? Water, our air is aerated. We're pushed through the water so it will never freeze even in our coldest temperatures in the winter. So you don't have to dry dock your boat in that marina. It's a residential building, very popular even to this day, from 1986. On our right, off in the distance, you can make out a red and white cell tower off in the distance. Where you see that white and red cell tower off in the distance, that's the location of our fire academy today, where we train our firefighters. And it's the exact location where the Great Chicago Fire started in 1871. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a few moments. I'm going to pause here, invite you to get your phones and cameras out. We're going to make a U-turn. Fabulous skyline view currently behind you, but soon to be on your left. Different architectural styles, some world-famous buildings, and a rare view because there's not a lot of foot traffic or street traffic from this perspective. So you've got Mr. Goldberg's unique architectural style, world-famous building, which I'll talk about in a little bit. That canal that I talked to you about, way down on our right-hand side is where the canal begins, way down the South Branch. On your right is a large shopping center which draws a lot of people to want to live in this area of town called South Loop.